Hey guys, welcome to episode 17 of Buckle Up with Simon and Brian, an ultra running conversation. How are you doing this evening, Simon?
I'm doing great. I'm wrapping up the Cocodona movie tonight. I have a deadline for tomorrow. So it's very exciting, great movie. And it's great actually when you put a movie together like that, you relive the adventure without the pain. So it's actually really fun and kind of nostalgic a little bit. But how about yourself? How are your knees, Brian?
My knees are doing well. I'm back to training a little bit. I guess we're 2 weeks out from Cocodona finish. Today, as we record, this will come out a little bit later, but 2 weeks out from finishing Cocodona, and I'm starting to get back in the routine again. Hey, speaking of Cocodona, which was a 200 miler, our guest tonight is doing the Triple Crown of 200s. Do you know what that is, Simon?
I sure do. The Triple Crown will be the three race from Destination Trail, organized by Candice. So it will be Tahoe 220, it will be Bigfoot 200, and Moab 240, which is an incredible achievement. So many 200 miler in such a short period of time, and getting your body and your mind through that is absolutely incredible.
That's right, Simon. Candice Bird is the founder of Destination Trails. She created the Triple Crown of 200s. This year they happen to be 8 weeks apart, which is I don't know, for lack of a better term, is probably the best case scenario. In years past, with snow issues and changes of schedule and different scenarios that come up, they've been as close as 3 weeks apart. Some of those 200s, which doesn't allow for much of anything between the races. So at least 8 weeks is the best case scenario at this point. So I'm really excited for our guest, Aum Gandhi. He is challenging himself at this 200-mile distance 3 times this summer. It's just a huge feat, a huge undertaking. It sounded like from our conversation, he'd been working on this plan for about 3 years. So it's not something he's taken lightly. It's not something he decided in January to give a whirl this year. He's really done his homework, and he has had a long trajectory to get to this point.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great talking to him, about the his preparation, but how his mindset towards training and the sport in general has evolved throughout this year to be able to be where he is today, ready to face the challenge in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah, openly admits that he, got into ultra running and running after some struggles with weight and some other medical issues that he was experiencing, and decided to get off the couch and go for a run. And it turned into this Triple Crown obsession, quite honestly, and it's great. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think you touched something important, which is he has a story that I think is very relatable, coming from challenges in his life and overcoming that. And I think that's something that he's sharing. And through a platform that he's working with, the Run Try Mag, they have a lot of stories like that. Both myself and Brian were on the podcast sharing our stories. And I think that's also a beautiful project that he has, which is really bringing the story behind human or people that are racing these race and having these open discussion with ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Yeah, Om is really fulfilling his commitment to the space that he enjoys to be in, which is this ultra running community. He's doing it through Run Try Bike or RunTryMag.com. He's also doing it with the Richstone Family Center. And this is an organization that's near and dear to his heart. It's an underserved community that needs some assistance and some help, and he's been flying their flag for their finish lines, and vows to keep flying their flag for all his next future finish lines. And it's just a great story, a great message. He is putting himself into the ultra community, and he is sharing across the boards. So without further ado, here's Aum Gandhi from Run Try Bike. Enjoy. everybody. Thanks for tuning in to Buckle Up with Simon and Brian. Ohm, welcome to the show. We are happy to have you.
I'm excited to be on, Brian, Simon. This is going to be a fun conversation and just excited to exchange stories and just chat about ultras, man.
Yeah, that's what the show's about. Buckle Up. It's an ultra running conversation. We want to know about you, Ohm. How did you find yourself here? You got a big summer coming up with three 200 milers coming up. And how did you find yourself in this niche space of ultra running?
Man, when everybody asks that, when everybody asks how I got started here, I think about the freeze frame with Spider-Man. That's exactly where my mind's going right now. But yeah, I didn't grow up with an athletic background. I was like a bench warmer in all the sports that I played. I was like last in PE class on the mile, was like always in remedial PE. I couldn't do my push-ups, my sit-ups. Was struggling with obesity most of my life, and then when I was 18 years old, I got a pre-diabetes diagnosis and just decided to like go on a weight loss journey, and basically lost about 90 pounds over the next couple of years, and just kind of went up and down and just tried a few different things. And then when I was 25, I was working a pretty high stress engineering job and was just looking for something after the long shift that I could just have of my own to escape and like find some like reprieve for like mental health. And just one of those nights after a long work shift, that was pretty normal at the time, I went out and just did like a quarter of a mile, and it was like the most nauseating, like it made me feel so sick, and it was just like a quick 5-minute run. But something kept bringing me back to it that time, and I just wanted to see what would happen if I didn't stop. And so I set a goal to run for 10 minutes, then 30 minutes, and then went from a 5K to doing a half marathon. And then COVID sort of happened, and I'd been signed up for my first road marathon, and all of that got canceled. We all know what happened in 2020, and Utah was the only place putting on races at the time. So I committed myself to, like any sane person would, I committed myself to my first 100 miler before I had done any 50K. The Zion 100 in 2021. This was like July of 2020. So I committed myself to Zion and started like racking up 50Ks from there, whatever was available. The races in Utah, as races started opening in California, like Kira's races, and just started working myself from there. And it's just been a journey from there, man.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. I'm sure you heard it, but also for me, I think it came a little bit from work, being crazy and thinking, okay, I need kind of something that is my time. And for me, it was consulting. And I don't know for engineering if it's like that, but usually the escape that people have is they go drinking with their buddy. And of course, I still did that. You have to be social, but you also know it's very unhealthy. You sleep like 3, 4 hours a night. You come home, you're drunk a little bit, you wake up at 6 or 7 to work again, and then just like finding a rhythm of like, no, let's go running instead really helped a lot. And it's funny because Zion, we actually raised Zion together that year, so 2021.
Yeah, and I
How
think
did it go for?
22 also.
Sorry.
And I think 22 also.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always do Zion, so if you ever went back, then I was there for sure. But how did it go for you? The first 100 without without having raced before. That's impressive.
Oh my goodness. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I Everything I found was like I was looking for, like there was Relentless Forward Commotion had like these free ultra running training plans. I was looking at YouTube videos, basically looking for kind of the same stuff that you're putting out now, Simon. Like I was
Yeah,
looking
that,
for
that's what I was thinking. I was like, you did pre-running with Simon, so like that was a dark age of how you should train. Now I think it's gonna be easier for people, but yeah. But it's
like,
amazing. I mean, and it's not an easy race, right?
oh my God, no, no. That race is people look at the cutoff, maybe people look at the elevation, they think like that's a pretty doable race. And granted, it is a doable race, but that it is by no means an easy race. It's exposed the entire time. There's lots of slick rock. I can't forget that dreaded asphalt climb up to Smith Mesa that most
Yeah.
mid packers do in the middle of the day. um, but yeah, I was actually the very last finisher on the time. I think I was like second to last based on the rolling start, but I was
Mm.
officially the DFL finisher of that race. And it turns out I only had a couple minutes to spare, so I'm glad I got the sprint. And it was like a wire to wire finish. The aid station captain of the last aid station was actually closing up and saw me in the loop, and I was looking at Avenza thinking I had 4 miles left with 45 minutes, and turns out I only had 2 miles left because Avenza was wrong.
Mm.
And so he kind of got me to push towards the end, and everything was kind of thrown at me during that race, and I just kept fighting and fighting and sprinted to that finish line and thought it was going to be the last thing I did. But as soon as I crossed that finish line, I was like, nope, I am gonna be finding more things now. And I'd already kind of learned about 200s a few weeks prior at that point, pacing Hector Rodriguez for the Triple Crown in 2021. So I started to find myself into that realm, and I think it was actually only a few weeks after Zion that I decided to go on my sobriety journey and stop drinking. And probably as a result of that and like going on that journey, also signed up for the very first Triple Crown of 200s registration in June of 2021. So here we are now.
That's amazing. Is it the same Hector Rodriguez from the Wolfpack? Just yeah, it is. Okay, that's really interesting. We had him on the podcast a few weeks back. So small world, and
Yeah,
people are helping each other.
yeah. Hector was in episode 9, I believe, just recently, just a few weeks before Cocodona, as a matter of fact, and we both saw Hector at Cocodona this year. It was great to reconnect with Hector.
Yeah, he's genuinely the reason why I got into the sport to begin with. And I reached out to him asking him if he needed help for Bigfoot and Moab, and having no idea what I was getting myself into. Not so much for Moab, because like you and I have seen it, Brian, but like Bigfoot is a monster to crew and pace. So,
Hmm.
but it taught me what I was getting into, and ever since then, I've just been working towards this goal of doing the Triple Crown of 200s. And it's crazy to think that something I signed up for almost 3 years ago is finally almost here in 3 weeks. So,
Yeah, that's right. You're 3 weeks out from the first one. Kicking off would be Tahoe. I want to say that is, what is it? Is it Father's Day, June 18th or something?
yeah, I think it's like June 14th. Yeah, it's
Oh,
June 14th at 9 a.m. when it starts, is when
yep.
Tahoe starts.
And then Bigfoot 200 would be, I think, 5 weeks later, if I'm not mistaken.
They're all 8 weeks apart this year. So
Oh,
I
eight
think it's
weeks.
like
Okay.
mid August, like
Oh,
right
mid-August.
before the week before Leadville. It's usually. And then
Hmm.
Moab would be 8 weeks right after that, I think, like mid
Hmm.
October.
Totally. Yeah. Well, that's actually a pretty good system right now. I remember they were a little more scrambled, or some of them were closer together in past because of changes in the calendar schedule and some of their logistics. But it sounds like they have a pretty strict regimen on the 8 weeks right now. So that actually works in your benefit, I believe.
Yeah, the Triple Crowners last year, I mean, shout out to them. They had to do Bigfoot and Tahoe 3 weeks apart and in some very difficult conditions. I definitely have asked myself that question a few times, not knowing what would happen with the snow this year. And although it would be possible, it would be pretty ugly based on just my recovery from those long races.
Yeah, and I think, because they do it mid-July or did it mid-July, it turns out to be much hotter probably, which will definitely be a factor on a long race like that. So we had friends that actually did the Tao 220 last year together, which I think is kind of I've told them already, but I think it's very stupid or crazy. But they did it, so they they proved me wrong. So Mark and Leon, which were both also on the podcast. But yeah, very excited for you. I mean, 3 years in the making. And how have you been preparing or training for it?
I've just been, when I first started like training for these races, I have like the crazy thing about there being like a 3 year timeline between like signing up for this and actually getting to it, as I've made so many evolutions as a runner.
Mm.
I was very much in the mindset of like I need to go get those 100-mile weeks like Goggins and Andrew Glaze, and I need to like be tough and like work through things. And ultimately, that got me through like probably my first 4 or 5 100s. But 2022 was definitely a tough year. Like I DNF'd 4 out of my 6 races that year. I was at Samo 100. I DNF'd that one, the inaugural one. I DNF. That was my Antelope 100. Was my first DNF. I got my. We talked about the redemption run this year.
Mm.
I got Zion that year, and then Moab. I got to 235 miles, and then got injured because I was. It was just the domino effect of like sleep was not proper, nutrition was not proper, and like slowed down considerably to the point where I was fighting a cutoff and I injured myself at 235, and that was an hour past cutoff. So that was that. And um, yeah, I just, ever since that Moab in, I call it the Moab 235 now. Every time I talk about it, I'm really proud of that race because I learned a lot of things from that helped me be a better individual and a better runner and lead a more healthy lifestyle in running. But there's just been like a massive evolution from that to like going to 2023 and like kind of working my way back up in distance from like doing 50Ks to doing the Everest Ultra in Nepal last year to eventually doing my first Trail 200 finish at Oregon 200 and working my way to the 6 day at ATY. And it was about last June where I decided like I was really all in on this, and so I brought on Peter Mortimer as my coach because I wanted to work with somebody who has not only done the distance but excelled at the distance. And I actually decided to put aside and hire a dietitian as well because I knew that my biggest struggle in 2022 was my GI issues, and we have done a tremendous job of like getting through these races and having like turning like 90% of the time like my stomach was going to turn to like making it like almost minimal. So I'm excited to like see all the pieces kind of coming together. um but I think the biggest thing is really that like I'm not putting any stock on like how far I'm going in training. More just like being intentional with my mileage, like thinking about time on feet, thinking about like what makes sense as opposed to like throwing mileage up against the wall and seeing what sticks, doing a lot of strength training, focusing hard on mobility and really giving recovery that my body, the recovery that it deserves. So I always tell people like, this is the least mileage I've done in the last 4 or 5 years, but I've never felt stronger.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's sad because it's such a common story, and or fortunately, I guess you had DNF, which is unfortunate, but you learned from that. But it doesn't sound like you necessarily had injuries that sideline you for 6 months or some major things. But it's very common. People get very motivated by a guy like Goggin or Glaze that they do things that, I mean, it's great that somehow, I don't know how they do it, but they can do it. But the average and even above average runner, their body will absolutely break down, and that's not necessarily the smartest way to train. And I mean, my message on my channel. I'm much more about training smart than training hard, and I'm much more about listening to yourself and building towards sustainability rather than denial of reality. And sometimes, I mean, honestly, sometimes it feels like it's an ego thing. Like, I mean, I don't want Goggin to go after me, but I think he has a big ego. And I think part of it is about showing off to other people. I'm so tough. And it's like that's great, but I will pass you. I will be faster than you, and I will not suffer as much. But hey, you're tougher than me. I mean, good for you. Um, I'll give you a hug at the finish line and say good job. But it's sad because some people will get the wrong message of running, and I'm really glad you made that transition. I think it's gonna serve you very well for the Triple Crown, where you can't get injured in the first one and expect to finish the other ones. You have to, when you line
Yeah.
up race like that, you have to think about the next race all the time, because this is not the end of the season yet. The season keeps rolling, and 8 weeks is a lot of time, but it's not that much, you know.
And like I one of the questions, so the hip injury that I got at the Moab 235 put me out for basically 6 weeks out of running, and like it
Oh,
wasn't until maybe 2 months that I felt like I could do any like real serious running, and then like I didn't really feel like myself again until February of 2023. But like I think that the biggest thing I asked myself when I was in that flux of like not doing something that I loved for like 6 weeks straight, which seemed like a very long time considering I'd done it every week since like 2018 April when I started,
yeah.
was like, do I want to be the firecracker that fizzles out and just like do this big thing, or do I want to do this till I'm 85, 90 for a long time? And um, that the answer was that I just really love this and I want to do this for a long time. And so um, for me, it's like uh, it's just about like doing all the things that'll get me there, whether it's like doing the mileage the right way, being intentional, like if I need to and just like not being afraid to rest, and like you
Mhm.
said, like being smart and intentional. Like if I'm having something respiratory, or if I had a stressful day at work, maybe it's not the day to do that speed workout, or maybe it's not the day to do a 2 hour run, maybe it's the day to do a 30-minute run. I have a mindset called all or something. I think many people are like beating themselves up if they don't get the full workout. But like if you can't do the 30-minute strength workout because work was hard, just do 5 minutes. It'll add up. If it's really not your day, go take a 30-minute nap. And that might be the thing that you need. Your body knows what it needs.
Yeah, no, for sure. And understanding that your training will never be perfect, even if you had done the 30-minute instead of the 5 minute. Is 30-minute really perfect anyway? So understanding that you have a goal, and sometimes if you have ambitious goal, both in training and in racing, ambitious means that you won't always reach them. And I think accepting that is important. And that's also part of, like having DNF is a growth opportunity. Having a training plan that you do 80% of it. Well, I aim for more than 80%, but there's, there's days that I'm just like, nah,
Mm-hmm.
pass. Not today. And and I'm okay with that. And I don't think anyone could look at my running resume and say Simon is such a lazy runner. I'm not, but sometimes I'm lazy, and that's okay. Like giving yourself some love will actually help, because we do it for fun. it,
Yeah, if you're not
at
having
least I do
fun.
it for fun. Yeah, if you're not having fun, why do you do it?
I've been in this space for a while, and I do remember back in the day, all we talked about was mileage or time on feet, and rarely did we talk about other things that you mentioned. But I do see a little bit of a shift. I do see people on Instagram talking about the recovery, the strength
Mm.
training, the rest. So it does seem like a bit of a shift. At least we're talking about it a lot more, and I think that'll bring some awareness and help others across the board, including yourself. It sounds like you're talking about all the things instead of, oh, I did X amount of hours this week, or this many miles, or this much vert. Those things are sort of important, but they're probably equal on the scale to all the other things: the strength training, the sleep, the rest, the recovery, the stretching, the yoga, or whatever you're doing for strength and mobility. But and I think those things really come um, from an understanding, like a Pete Mortimer or an experienced coach that has that knowledge, and I think the coaching process is really just kind of helping that along as well. So
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I definitely have to agree about like the coaching process helping out with that, because
Mm.
one of the things I like about Pete is he's not infallible to rest. Like he'll tell me like, "Oh, I just had a stressful day at work," or like you're doing great with yours, man. Like I got sick this entire week, and this is my first run back, and like just like realizing that like we are not machines, we're humans, and yeah, you have to, like if you really sit down and listen, your body is telling you exactly what it needs. And I'm not saying there aren't days where like you shouldn't go out and run on that rainy day or push through and like build some of that mental toughness, but like I do also think that like there has to be a balance between like sometimes it is time for that nap on the couch, or like go eat the pizza, or like like find a find a balance of everything, and everything always and things tend to work themselves out.
Totally, 100% I'm with that. And I think we say a lot, rest is important in these things because that's kind of a pendulum shift, I'm sorry, my French is just blah, but it's just shifting in one direction. So we say people are overtraining. So I'm saying like, don't overtrain, but there's a difference between being smart about you're training too much and straight up being lazy and just not doing what you need to do. Or on the flip side, I I think it's important to listen to yourself to what you can do. I mean, there are days where I had a pretty low mileage, slow mileage in my training plan. And I'm like, but I'm feeling really good right now. I feel that it's a good day for an interval. You know what? I'm gonna shift things in my schedule. Today's interval, I'm gonna push. I'm gonna go crazy. Last weekend I raced. I was not supposed to race, and I was just feeling my recovery was allowing me to do the race. I was like, well, I didn't expect it to be like that, but I know I could do it. Let's do it. Like, let's push my limit. And sometimes you need to push your limit. Sometimes you need to do something slightly stupid, but also sometimes you need to dial it back. And it's finding the middle is very difficult. And I think we need to be honest with ourselves as to what kind of personality are we? Are we the kind that find excuse all the time to not go work out? Like, oh, it's raining. Oh no, I can't go. Or you're the opposite kind of type A, always pushing harder, always doing more miles to the point of injuries. And when you're honest with yourself, you'll find a better way to make the right decision. Or if you have a coach, someone that is outsider and is able with knowledge to say, look, um, you're being stupid right now, So
Yeah, and I think that both of you probably can attest to this, but I do think that the experience that I have, the little experience I have with it, I think that like it's always going to be, you're always going to spend your entire life trying to find like that balancing act of like pushing and like being able to rest. And I think that everybody is trying to stay within that circle and trying to figure things out. And we're not always perfect with it, but like you do your best and you show up, and or some days you don't show up and, and get, or you show up for your recovery, I should say, because that is, recovery is training. Again, recovery is training. So I think that we're all uh, finding that balancing act, like on the trapeze or whatever they call it, the wire.
I see that in a lot of athletes as well, and it's interesting because when I'm working with Training Peaks and I'm moving stuff around in people's calendars, and it's okay. I get it. Like we gotta take Tuesday off. The dog got sick. The kid stayed home from school. Too many work meetings, and you just run out of time in the day. And I totally understand it, right? So you miss the workout, but I start to see where athletes like start to kick the can down the road. They take Tuesday's workout and they stack it on Wednesday, and now like the stress of having to do Wednesday's workout and Tuesday's workout, like it builds anxiety and it builds this stress, right? And then and then Wednesday it doesn't work out. The kid's still sick. The dog needs to go to the vet because his dog is actually sick. Like the whole thing starts piling up, and then all of a sudden, like they move Tuesday, which is now Tuesday and Wednesday, and they move that to Thursday. And so now they got like 3 workouts built. And so I really think the process, and it sounds like you're doing it as well, is like if we're taking that rest day, that needed rest day, that's outside of the normal schedule, like you also have to let it go and like just pick up tomorrow where it is, like, and you can't keep kicking the can down the road and trying to move things farther down the schedule.
Yeah, I can't pretend that I haven't done that before. It's just like looking at a Tuesday workout sometimes, like I mean, like now that I've kind of changed my mindset, like, and now that I know that I'm not like gray lining the runs like I used to back in the day, and like my easy runs are actually easy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will go to those like speed workouts and hill sessions and think this is fun. I get to break up the monotony. This is cool. But I know there are certain days when I'm like, oh man, my legs feel like trash today. Like I don't know how this is gonna go. And it's a funny thing, man, because I've seen a YouTuber do this. I think his name is Goran Windblad. I think his name is. I've seen this rule passed around. I don't know if you've heard it, but like the 10-minute rule. I'll go out and like see how my run feels in the first 10 minutes, and oftentimes I'll go out with trash legs, and after 10 minutes I actually have a really good run. And then some days I'll go out feeling pretty good and then it's not the best run. But um yeah, I think there is something to like finding that balance of like trying not to like kick things down the road, but also like knowing that you've had a bad day, and just like taking that unplanned rest day when you need it.
Mhm.
Totally. When you get older, that turns into 15 minutes. It actually grows every year. So I'm at 15 minutes now. I need to run for 15 before I can move on. Hey, thanks for the update and sharing your story. How you found yourself at 200s. Obviously, we wish you the best of success this year. Both Simon and I will be tuned in and following along for the 200s. I do want to shift gears just a slight bit, and I wanted to talk about Run Try Bike and the Run Try Bike community, and what it is, what you guys are looking to achieve, and what's going on with Run Try Bike these days.
Run Try Bike is a media company that is focused around one goal, and that is telling the stories, the extraordinary stories of the ordinary athletes. So we're a multi-sport platform. We're not just ultra running. We're road running, like triathlon, gravel cycling, all endurance sports. And our entire goal is to just make everybody feel that, and not feel, but like let everybody know that they do have a spot at the start line and that there is a place for them there. And we do it by telling as many everyday athlete stories as possible. Stories like we've shared your story, Brian, and your story, Simon, and it's resonated with people. Um, and just giving people more blueprints, because we've definitely had the reception of like people telling their stories and other people stepping up and telling their stories, or talking about like how they saw uh, like Lauren's story on the website, and she has a similar disability and it inspires them to like do something. But the stories that we hear are amazing. Obviously, like Brian, we've heard your story of sobriety, and like um, just like we've heard stories of just overcoming all kinds of things like postpartum, moms returning to triathlon, and somebody who's had like MS or ankylosing spondylitis and is running, and just people are amazing. And I think that every single time, even before I joined Run Try Bike, and Jason, who started the business back in October of 2020, I joined him a couple years ago. But even before I joined the business and I would stand at these start lines, I always, ever so often, had this passing thought of like how every single person has a reason for why they're there. And that reason could just be like, I just want to go have fun and do miles, but it could be a deeper reason. And it's just be cool to have built a media company and work with these amazing advertising partners who share our mission and vision to be able to create a platform for the everyday athlete. Because 99% of us are not getting paid to do this. We're not on, there's only 3 spots on the podium. What about the rest of us? There are so many good stories out there, and we just want to create that space where people feel like they can share their stories.
It's great. I personally love it. I think it's a great platform. I relate it to, when you're deep into an ultra, maybe not even that deep. Maybe you're in the first 20 miles, but you're in that ultra, and I run up on Aum, and I've never met him before, and we start talking. Where are you from? Where are you from? What have you done? I've done this, and then I mean that's surface level, and then because we're running, we get into this deep dive of a story and a tangent. Well, we could share that we have sobriety in common, and how did you get sober? And then we start digging deep and we hear these stories, but it's only the first person account, right? And I think you guys on this platform are taking it like to 10x. You're sharing it with broader communities, and it makes the feats that we're doing really human. It brings the human element to it, where you're sharing like, oh, we are human. We do have faults. We have fixed things in our lives. We have challenges. We have struggles, and then we can relate to each other through the platform. So I think it's just an awesome platform.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, appreciate both of you telling your stories. And, we've had Simon on our fireside chat as well. That was a great conversation. Uh, I just think like, I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's creating that sense of community and that's exactly the kind of vibe that Jason and I talk about all the time. It's just like, uh, ultimately our conversation, we got to really know each other when I came out to be a captain at the last Moab 240, and
Hmm.
that ultimately led to us having conversations with people around us and you telling your story. And I think that that is the vibe that and energy that we're trying to create, where like people are almost like you are at a trail race or a racing event, and you're just talking to people and you're on the trail, and you're just having this conversation and getting to know each other's stories, and just things, all of a sudden like things come out, like you know how deep those conversations can get. And the crazy thing is, like 9 out of 10 people, well, when we ask them to interview with us, we'll, and I think we all go through this, they'll say that my story doesn't matter, why do you want my
Mm.
story? And then say like, um, because you have a story. We've heard people say like, I don't have a story. Like, yeah, you do. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a reason for why they do things. And um, I think that that's the important thing too, is like not just focusing on the endurance feat. I think focusing on the life story and using endurance sports as the conduit, and how those two work together.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I actually have two stories I wanted to share. One was that I met a participant at Cocodona. One of my goals was to get outside of myself and meet new people. I tend to hang with the same people, especially if I'm familiar with them. And I didn't want to do that this time. I wanted to meet some new people. And man, did I tell you, I met just the coolest athlete. What a crazy story. I won't share too much of her journey. It's her story to tell. But we shed tears and hugged on the trail. I mean, like that's how deep we went. Like it was pretty special, and we've been messaging each other since then. And that's just like the community. And it, so that same vibe's coming across in this Run Try Bike platform that you guys have built up to, to have. I don't even know how many interviews you have, like hundreds of them, right?
It's got to be like over. We shared our 200th everyday athlete story probably like back in February, so we might be getting close to over
Hmm.
300 at this point.
Yeah,
And we just have
that's amazing.
tons and tons of interviews. But quick story with that. Like at my second Zion 100, I met a lady named Shauna who was doing her first 100 and was a mountaineer and had been on a 7, 8 year at the time sobriety journey. And we started talking and got into like deep conversation and really just stayed in touch over the years. Sure enough, I was doing Antelope 100 and she was out there doing the 50 miler. And we reconnected after 2 years and she's like, "Oh, is that you?" And we started chatting, and it was like a little trail reunion because I knew stuff had happened in
Hmm.
her life. But to that, since that point, she had continued her sobriety journey. She had gotten married, but it was weird because it had been 2 years, but it felt like we had just like it was just like old friends reconnecting.
Hmm.
And that's the kind of energy that we're trying to create at Run Try Bike. Is I think that similar energy that we feel on the trails of like you're just talking to an old friend at some point, or you feel like you've known each other for a very long time. Um, and honestly, like one of the there are a lot of sad feelings in life, but there is not one feeling sadder than when you leave a trail race and it feels like you're leaving your people. And that's like it's the kind of community we're trying to create, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the connection you make on trail through, I mean, it's not necessarily the fact that it's on trail. I think it's because we're facing adversity and we're living a very intense moment very close together, then you bond very quickly and you'll always find something in common with almost everyone. I mean, there are times that I've met people on trail and I think, all right, I'm just gonna run a little faster now. But but usually that's not the case. You'll find something to talk about and then you get to discover someone. And obviously everyone who's there, they have their whole life before them that brought them to exactly at mile 32 after exactly 8 hours and 11 minutes, just like you. And then you get to connect over that. And then the rhythm is also very different. At work, I meet people every day, the same people, and it will be, hey, did you watch the game? Or, it's sunny outside. You never really connect deeply, but you meet them all the time. Whereas racing buddies, like Brian, we hadn't seen him, I think, for a while, actually, maybe since last summer, right, Brian? When was the last time
I
we
bet
met? It
it
was
was
probably
Leadville. I
Leadville.
think
Yeah.
Leadville.
Yeah. It's like we meet like once or twice a year, but when we meet, like it's great. And then apparently Brian didn't want to hang out, so he made sure to run slower was his strategy. He was like, well, I'll meet new people if I'm very, very slow. So, I mean, good strategy, Brian. Good
So
job.
Simon already gave his secret away. He runs a little faster if he doesn't want to hang out with you. I do quite the opposite.
Yep.
I pretend to tie my shoe. So actually, Simon and I did that at the exact same moment. He started running faster, and I tied my shoe at
Oh
Cocodona,
God.
and then we
It
never
took
saw
you
each other till the finish line.
so it took you 12 hours to tie that shoe, really, Brian? Really?
11 hours and 10 minutes, Simon.
Okay, okay, sure.
I don't want to get too sidetracked, but to go back to Run Try Bike in the community, and you had a point, and I wanted there was a second part I wanted to touch on, which was the point about sharing and feeling like your story is not worthy of sharing, right? And
Mm,
that is so true across the boards. I was that way for a long, long time. I didn't think there was anything unique about my story, and then I took a different approach to it. I started to think, well, I mean, there are some things that are unique about my story, but there's a lot of it that's pretty generic. You know, I got sober. You know, I struggled with drugs and alcohol, and I ultra run. I mean, those are we could find that in our space quite a bit, right? Those same challenges. But my thought process changed to, like, if I could just help one person, or if somebody hears that message and decides to change their life, you know, all the better. And it doesn't cost me anything. It actually helps me to talk about things more, and to become open with other people and share my story and my message with others. So I think it's like, for me, it's twofold. Like, I get something out of it on both ends. If you get something out of it, that helps me, and I get something out of it by just sharing and talking more about it. It becomes more open, more public. People know where I stand on things. You know, Simon doesn't offer me any more beers. You know, all those things.
Yeah, it's yeah, I absolutely got to agree with, like, now that I think back, actually, I think that was how we first connected too. Was I saw a Facebook post that you made about your
Mm.
sobriety. I think your sobriety anniversary or something, like shortly before I came over to. We met each other more personally at Moab. Um, and then of course, like, you were a trail ninja at across the years, sitting in that volunteer booth. I just I was always like scared to tell my story, and just, scared of being judged, and like, scared of like the stuff that I'd gone through. And um, one of the things that I truly believe, even though I've been sharing my story for years, and ultimately, if it wasn't for sharing my story, Jason would not have found me, and I would not be a business partner in Run Try Bike today. I would not be where I am today. But I do think that I agree with your point that, like, sharing your story not only helps other people, but it also frees you, the more you share those things. And also, it helps other people know that they're not alone in going through those struggles. One of the, when I first started putting out some of the deeper parts of like some of the stuff I've been through last year, it was motivated by, like, basically letting people know, like, hey, if you're gonna be vulnerable with us, like, myself and Jason, like, both of us, we're gonna be vulnerable with you. So Jason started opening up about his eating disorder, made an article about it, like the struggles he had gone through during his triathlon days and his sobriety journey. And I made an article last year about my body dysmorphia as a male, because I've struggled with obesity and had multiple types of eating disorders in my life. And people started opening up to us more, and it created this community and this air of like security and safety, knowing that, like, um, you're not alone. And it's just the craziest irony to me is that, like, we live in this world where everything is so connected. You can talk to somebody halfway across the world, and yet people feel so alone. And so you have to, like, I feel like when you have a story like that, I personally, I almost feel obligated to tell my story, because I feel like, I know that it's going to help. And I've seen people message me and tell me like it's helped them out. Um, and I'm sure that's happened, for both of you in some way, shape, or form too. But I do think that, like, it really creates that air of community and safety, and encourages other people to break out of their break their barriers and tell their story as well to help the next person. So it's almost like a pay it forward kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. I have to agree, obviously, but it's funny that you saw one of my posts about sobriety, and we connected on that outside. But it's it was initially amazing to me that like people, I put out a lot of marketing stuff for my business and all this other stuff on social media, and I throw up one sobriety post and I get like 20 messages instantly, and people are hitting me up. I mean, either congratulating me or telling me they're on the same journey that I am. And the connection is just so more human than to hear about my business plan. I mean, like everyone's like, oh, it's just another business plan, whatever. But it's interesting. So and I've actually gotten work through the sobriety messages, right? Like people are like, oh, I can relate to Coach Brian, and I want you to coach me because we're on the same journey for sobriety as well as ultra running, right? So it's just kind of weird the way it all evolves like that. And initially, I thought, that's ridiculous. Why would anyone contact me about sobriety? But it's just kind of it's kind of evolved, and I get way more messages about my human aspects of me than my business aspects of myself. Um,
Yeah, it's funny. One of the reasons, of course, like I chose Peter because of his experience in 200s, but one of the reasons that I gravitated towards him was because he was very much a late bloomer in the sport. He didn't start running until his late 20s, I think maybe even until he was like 30 years old. Had sort of been on like, he's not like sober, but he had definitely been on like a alcohol like usage to moderation journey, and struggled with obesity for a good part of his life. And so like those are all like things that I kind of related to, and I think I gravitated towards like the human side of the coach. I came for the 200-mile thing, but I stayed
mhm,
for like the human side of the coach.
totally.
And
Yeah.
also like just the relatability of him being like this everyday guy who is doing these races and excelling at them, but he's also like a surgeon for his day job. Like he'll literally cancel races because he has to schedule a surgery. Like, if like, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourself, but like, I think like people seeing that human side and that everyday side is just, I think it really is like, I think that's where a lot of the connection is made between coach and client for sure.
Yeah, totally. I can attest to that for sure. I do get clients that show up for the run training, and then we wind up being on each other's Christmas card lists, right? We're sharing everything. I get mugs for my birthday. I get coffee mugs for Christmas. Like all those things. I get the Christmas cards. Yeah, it is such a it is so much deeper than just coaching, right? It's so much deeper than just the Training Peaks metrics and TSS scores, right? Yeah, thanks for sharing about Run Try Bike. Again, it's a really great community. If you're not aware of it, I think it's runtrybike.com or Run Try Mag,
Runtrymag.com. Yeah,
runtrymag.com.
it's all Run Try Mag on all the handles.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a great resource. The platforms are, I mean, you have everything going on. You have the blogs, which like written stories. You have the video, um, uh, the video diaries of different athletes and coming in. So you just have like all the platforms covered. So I really appreciate it. I wanted to dive, while we still have a little bit of time left, I wanted to dive into another project that you're involved in, which is the Richstone Family Center. Um, can you tell us a bit about what's going on there, what it means to you, and how you got involved?
Yeah, I started getting involved with the Richstone Family Center back actually when I was still in college, studying to be a civil engineer, and we were just working with different parts of like the local community and just like introducing. We I was working with the club that was going around like introducing like STEM, science, technology, engineering, math to lower income bracket areas. And we were like, it was females, lower income bracket areas, minorities, and that was how we initially connected with Richstone Family Center. It was to do a rainwater rain barrel catchment system, rainwater catchment system for Richstone, and some engineering activities and some STEM lessons to introduce them to those majors and those opportunities. And Had a lot of fun. Got to see what they did as an organization in Hawthorne, creating a safe space in an area that is generally riddled with like substance abuse, depression, gang violence, deep in like LA. And just, got to see what they did as an organization growing up in an area where I grew up. And just gravitated towards that, stayed in touch over the years with the director. And flash forward to 2021, I'd always done my longer races running for a purpose. During the COVID times, like I was running for an organization that was making hot meals for the homeless for my first 100, and for a couple other races, ran for the COVID crisis in India. And um, I was just looking for a longer partnership with an organization that shared my message and my values and ideals. And I had set this, I had the Triple Crown goal since June of 2021. And so my next natural step was to try to do some sort of a multi-day race so I could see how I react to multiple nights without sleep. And uh, yourself, like doing a loop race. One of the benefits of it, despite the fact that you're not really going anywhere, is that you can test out a lot of things like sleep strategy, nutrition without falling off a mountain. And so I signed up for a 72-hour race in December of 2021, my first multi-day race, and reconnected with Richstone and decided to represent them. And we made a whole documentary about the thing. And raised $2,500 for Richstone. So I just kept uh, going with it and just soliciting like funds for Richstone and raising awareness more so for the fact that like if you had an organization like this in every city in the US and every city in the world, then the world would be a much better place. But just reinforcing the message that like we need to end child abuse, we need to end domestic violence, we need to talk about generational trauma, which are all like big things that I dealt with myself. And so I just keep like, I've stayed in touch over the years and continue to, we've raised probably like close to 13, 14,000 over the last like couple years. And now I just consistently make sure to like send people to their website to continue to raise awareness through my races and go visit them whenever I get the chance and hang out with the kids, whether that's like tutoring or that's always the funny thing, right? Like people think I'm going there every single time, and it's like Instagram where I'm like giving them an epic speech about my races, but sometimes it's just a simple act of like reading a book to them or being there and being that big brother figure. Um, and just it gives me extra purpose knowing that like they created like this flag banner, which you've probably seen on my Instagram page. They surprised me with that flag banner. I had no idea that that was going to happen. They all got together, put their handprints on it, and then Richstone got the thing made and surprised me with it. And I made a promise that I was going to carry it across every finish line and that I was going to sprint every finish in. And so far, I've done that and plan to do that for every Triple Crown race. But yeah, I plan to represent Richstone and that banner at every single race going forward. And honestly, that is probably greater than any buckle I've ever gotten. Like knowing that, like when I show up to these races, like I'm not just representing myself, I'm representing all the names and the organization. And just knowing that those kids are like when they're doing their after school club, like if it's a weekday or even when they're hanging out, like they're watching the tracker on these races, watching my blip move along and cheering me on. It's a lot of fun, and the reactions are genuinely funny. Like uh I love some of the kids, like the age 5 kids are like, did you win? And in my mind, I'm like, we're all winners here, buddy. And like, did you get a gold medal? I'm like, I showed them my buckles. I said, these are the gold medals. um, but I think just like, for me, the biggest thing is also just being able to teach them lessons through ultra running because kids are not always receptive to like you like being preachy and telling them things, but like showing them like you can get through any highs and lows. Like you can do things even if you're not an elite athlete. Like you can do hard things, whether it's like ultra running or life. Being able to convey that message through doing the boneheaded thing that I do is a pretty cool thing. So
It's a great cause. It sounds like it's a great fit for both of you guys. Having that greater message also probably helps you through the event, knowing that those kids are watching and they're looking up to you. I've had similar experiences, and I know that's always a help. I'm sure they appreciate all the assistance, and yeah, and it's interesting that that we do assume that maybe you just show up with a check, your big 3 foot by 2 foot check, and drop it off at the front door for the picture and walk away. But no, but it's awesome that you're getting in there and getting dirty, getting on the floor and reading books with kids, and kind of getting elbow deep in there, right? So I'm sure they appreciate it. It's a great message.
yeah, like definitely getting deep in there, man. I'm doing the serious things like reading them books about the Gruffalo and uh, doing those time. I don't even remember. Like I don't know how kids learn these days, man. Like Common Core math and timetables and stuff. I don't remember that stuff. um, I'm pretty sure I've led them astray more than I've actually helped them. But I think just being there is the important thing. So
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Richstone Family Center. You're currently on there, or do you have like a donation page or something that like a link that we can put up in the comments or in the show notes? And what might it be?
So for Richstone Family Center, I used to have a donation link and a GoFundMe and everything, but I made a collective decision with the organization that I am very tired of the third party fees and stuff. So instead of having a donation page on my Instagram or my Facebook or my GoFundMe, I just send people directly to the website, not only to generate awareness and traffic, but also to like avoid those third party fees and like donate directly to the organization. And because there's a lot of like, I think one of the biggest things with charities is there's a lot of distrust and stuff going around. We've seen it, and um, I personally feel more comfortable sending people directly to the organization than I do like creating a third party campaign. So it'll be richstonefamily.org.
Great, great. So if all 10 of our listeners chipped in $10, we'll get you $100, to help out
It
with
all
that.
goes a long way, guys. It all goes a long way, and even just like sharing and raising awareness for it, like it all adds up.
Totally, totally. Hey, one last topic I wanted to touch on, is your recent achievement here at the Highland Ultra in Scotland. It looked like an epic, epic race. I got the website up on my side screen here, and man,
Got the medal right here.
this thing looks cool as heck. Yeah, hold that thing up a little higher. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a piece of wood from Neudart, which is like one of the coolest things I've ever gotten as a finisher medal. So
that's awesome. Um, what was it? What was it like? How did you get there? I mean, Scotland is just, the other side of the world, right?
yeah, other across the pond, just across the street, across the pond, however you want to call it. But it was my first time actually going to the UK, and it was actually my first time going to Europe. Depending on who you ask. But yeah, I'd wanted to go to Scotland for a long time. I'd done one of Chris King's races before, the Beyond the Ultimate Jungle Ultra. Did not finish that one, but had such an amazing experience doing the self-sufficient format, which is like a carry your own gear, carry all your food over the 3 days, and your sleeping pad and your tent. So it's like almost like a fast packing type of adventure race, and just had an amazing experience and wanted to do the Highland Ultra. I had not had the opportunity to do a stage race last year, and I really started to fall in love with the format, and wanted to do the Highland Ultra, not only because it was the kind of experience I was looking for with that self-sufficient format, but it also worked out perfectly as good training for the Triple Crown because of carrying that additional weight and like focusing more on my power hiking technique, which is very important for a 200. Um, and yeah, it's getting there was quite a mission. I mean, it was going from It was LAX, basically like 12, 13 hours of total flight time to get to Edinburgh, and then 6 hour train from Edinburgh to Malig, which is a coastal town like in the Northwest Isles. And from Malig, it was I got there at like I landed after a 13-hour flight, got there at midnight, and then 6 hours after, no, it was maybe 8 hours after, I took a ferry, a 45-minute ferry to get to the island of Noidart, which it's so crazy. Like, people have heard of Isle of Skye, but if you ask anybody about Noidart, even every single person I told about Noidart while chatting in Edinburgh had no idea what it was. It's so like uh, it's such a remote place that people in Scotland don't know what Noidart is.
Hmm.
There are maybe 100 people who live on the island, half of them who live in this small town called Invery that has like maybe 10 buildings. And they have maybe 5 kids there who go to primary school, and 3 of them are siblings. So it is as remote as you can get. Um, and I gotta say, man, it was so essentially the experience was back to back 50Ks and a 25K where it was just like, oh, it's just 25K. But boy, was I wrong. It was not just 25K. This race was a lot of like not really trails, a lot of bogs, which I hear is very common in the UK. A lot of rain on the first day, so much so that like it wasn't just Scotland weather. It was, man, this is one of the worst storms we've ever had.
Hmm.
And then the second and third day, the weather got toasty and better, and we went up some towering ridge lines, and it was just up and down a mountain, like literally throwing you up the side of a mountain, down, up the side, and you think that you've gotten to the summit, and it's just one ridge line after one peak after another on the same ridge line. And um, it was just an unbelievable experience. Anything you can imagine happened, like almost getting washed away by a ravine, like running into Highland cows, uh, falling into a lot of puddles that you think are like an inch deep with your trekking poles, but then when you step on it, you're like, I'm a 6 foot guy. I was all the way up to my hip on some of them,
Hmm.
and had to like pull myself out of them. And most importantly, lots of Lord of the Rings vibes. It looked a lot like, I know Lord of the Rings was New Zealand guys, but I wasn't the only one feeling it. Everybody was making Middle Earth like quotes. Like, we spent the entire me and my Estonian friend who I met out there spent the entire third day saying 3 days, no food, no rest, just making like orc quotes. And if you look at any of the reels on my Instagram, they're all Lord of the Rings songs because they have to be. It's just very much a lot of Middle Earth was spoken out there. And then we finished the race and we went to Britain's most remote pub, the Old Forge, and we partied the night away. I had a cool little soda that they have over there called an Iron Brew, and it's a traditional experience with like folk music and dogs looking for crumbs, and learning some Scottish like folk dances. And then yeah, that was essentially the experience in a nutshell.
Well, that sounds like an amazing journey.
It was man, it was, I don't even know how to describe it to this point yet. Like it was just, it was honestly like one of the hardest things I've ever done. And people think it's wild when I like look at a race like the Everest Ultra, which is a 60K, or I look at this 125K and they're like, but you've done 200 miles. I'm like, but not all terrain is created equal.
Hmm.
um, and it's just, it was literally one of the hardest things I've ever done. And it pushed me in so many different ways. And um, it was truly the essence of adventure, which it kind of it was like adventuring in one of its purest forms, which I think is a lot of Chris's races, and I'm excited to do more of his races next year.
Without diving too deep in the weeds, what a typical, I think my typical pack at Cocodona was maybe at the most 8 or 9 pounds. What kind of weight were you carrying in your pack? Do you think? I'm sure you didn't weigh it, but what do you think it roughly weighed?
Oh, I absolutely weighed it. It was
Okay, even
21
better.
pounds. It was
Yeah.
21
Wow.
pounds. And then, of course, it rained on the first day. So even though I got rid of food, my pack was heavier because it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
covered with rain. But it just made you want to get through your freeze dried meals and stuff faster so you could reduce your weight, get through your medical supplies faster. A lot of like required kit you have to wear. So I'm like, might as well use these rehydration salts. Might as well use this leukotape. Like reduce my weight, reduce my weight. And by the third day, it was definitely probably like 16, 17 pounds, but it was still like heavy. It was still heavier than anything you'd have in a typical race for sure. There were only 30 runners in this group. We all agreed that like it was funny. We were all having separate conversations about Middle Earth, and we were all thinking the same thing. Uh, so there was definitely like, and I think like this goes back to this is just my own personal thing. I don't know if you guys have done this in longer races too, but sometimes I like to pretend and role play that I'm on an adventure, like slaying the dragon of the LaSalles at Moab, and just just like to have a little fun. I mean, you gotta have. It goes back to like talking about having fun, right? Like you gotta have fun with it, and I think just throwing a little bit of quotes and role play in there just kind of like just makes things a lot more fun. And people don't always like the dad jokes. So I got to switch things up.
Well, that sounds like a great adventure. Congrats. I enjoyed watching your Instagram reels and all the other social media posts you put out about it, and it was cool to see. It looks super unique and just an adventure, all different. Maybe not all different, but just unique in the space that we are in, which sometimes always is, 15-mile aid stations with peanut butter and jelly rolls. So this seems a little bit different.
Yeah, just totally unique experience for sure. And just really, I think switching it up and doing things like that and switching up I think that I always hear conversations about like, um, going down in the distance or like going like you've already done 200s, what have you got to gain from a 50K and this and that, and I'm just like, just do what you want to do, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
go out and have fun, and if a 50K is what calls out to you, like it could be just as hard. Like I'm not gonna go tomorrow and do an all out sub 5 hour 50K. I would rather go out and I'm definitely a like a slow burning candle for sure. Like I love the really long stuff, the hundreds, the 200s. But I really think it's important to emphasize like it. You should go out and do what you enjoy and what sets your soul on fire and what gives you that sense of adventure and what you're craving. Because again, it just goes back to having fun with it. I could wake up after the Triple Crown and decide like I want to do shorter distances for a while, and if that's what I want to do, that's what I'll do. I could wake up and decide I want to go sign up for the Swiss Alps 360K, but you just never know. And maybe you can attest to this, Brian, having been in the sport for so long, but I think you have to like keep things like fun, and you have to go find the things that set your soul on fire to like have that longevity in the sport.
Yeah, definitely. I can totally relate to that. There was a couple years. Well, there was a couple years. I mean, there's like almost a whole decade where I raced triathlon predominantly. There's another couple of years where I challenged myself at the the road marathon majors, and trying to test my luck there just a little bit. So I think it's always keeping it fresh, and it ebbs and flows, and whatever your interests are, there's nothing wrong with it. You should just run with it, literally run with it, right? And there's nothing really, short about 125K. I'm doing the math in my head because I'm not a kilometer guy, but I think it's about 78, 79 miles, fully self-supported, with a 20-pound pack. I mean, that sounds like a long weekend. I mean, that's challenging.
Yeah, it's about 20 hours on my feet over the week. And then going back to camp and the untold part about stage racing, the recovering in between, and the preparations at camp, and telling your stories at the fire and the warm tent and stuff. And I think having the mindset and mentality to be able to bounce back the next day, after you've had a
Mhm.
really long day already, is one of the challenges of stage racing that I think is very underrated compared to like Like if it were up to me, I would say it's nighttime. What's the big deal? Just go out. It's what I'm used to.
Was that your first experience with a stage race?
I had done the Jungle Ultra back in 2022,
Oh,
and I also
you
did
mentioned that. Yeah.
Trans Rockies in 2022.
Hmm.
Both very different experiences. Trans Rockies is definitely more of a glamping type of like fun race, and also still a very difficult race. And Jungle Ultra was very much like get to camp at the end of the rainforest, tired, and set up your hammock and hope that fire ants don't bite you. Different experiences.
Yeah, a real survival test.
Yeah, definitely excited to go back to that in 2025. So
That's awesome. Well, thanks for the great stories. I just got one more thing. We do a little blip about coaching and the coach's corner. We'd love your input as well. Um, we ask questions on the interweb, and we get questions asked about coaching. I do coach through Altitude Endurance Coaching, and tonight's question comes from Adam. Adam and I just spoke today, but Adam asks, "Does heat training during the hottest part of the day help any when attempting to acclimate to altitude?" What do you think, Simon? What do you think your answer is there?
I mean, I know what people say. They say that heat training and heat adapting would help for altitude. I'm not sure I've seen that at all, honestly. And I think the example I can give, and the way the sentence is said, to me, it sounds like, should I go run in the middle of the day when it's hot to acclimate to altitude? And I think that's not even sufficient to heat adapt. If you want to heat adapt, I do have a video about that, but sauna sessions are really, really, really helpful. It's really changing your body within 1 week. You triple the amount of sweating that you do. Like it's kind of insane how much you're changing very quickly. But even with that, I raced bad water, and then we went directly to Colorado at altitude, and I was all fucked up from altitude. I That really did not help. I was really struggling even when I was at 10 or 11,000, having huge headaches. So I was at the peak of being heat adapted, and I don't think that's done anything for me in terms of being ready for altitude. I know what they say, but that has definitely not worked for me.
Fair enough. Fair answer. What about you, You have any thoughts on that? Any experience, firsthand or
you,
secondhand or anything?
for I have to definitely agree about like going out in the middle of the day with the heat not really helping too much with altitude because I definitely done my fair share of heat training and back in the early days of ultra running when I really did go up to altitude like Moab definitely had like some high altitude sections during the race. I and even just like going out to like train in the Sierras or hit some 14ers and stuff. Like I can't. I have not personally seen a direct correlation between like that heat training and adapting to altitude, but I will say that I spend a lot of time training and I spent a few weeks, like 7, 8 weeks actually, staying out in Flagstaff before I did the Everest Ultra last year and doing actual like threshold training up at altitude and getting used to like I think getting my body used to altitude because I've been at sea level my whole life. And I noticed that there was a lasting effect from that that not only probably helped me finish the Everest Ultra and also the Tahoe Rim Trail 100, but also I think that there's a lasting like um, and maybe there's no scientific basis behind this. Maybe it's a placebo effect, but I've noticed that as I've gone back to altitude and training for Tahoe, like I noticed that what would have given me a headache going up here to like up to like 10,000 with Mount Baldy to train into San Gabriel's, like what would have normally given me a headache past like 6, 7,000, my body was very quick to adapt to it as if like, oh, you've already been here before. We just haven't done it in a long time. So I do think that there is I know that not everybody can reach that altitude. Um, but I do think that like if you're able to like find the time to like go out and do maybe schedule a race out in like Colorado or like um, find some time to like go out to like altitude, then I do think that it does make a difference in helping you prepare for those races. And I think getting your body used to that, I think similar to heat adaptation and bad water, I think you just need to let your body experience altitude, and it'll help you with that for sure.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, Adam, for the question. I do work with Adam. I do know a little bit more about the context of his question. He does live in the South. It's not an option to get up to altitude too much. He lives in, I believe, the Georgia area. Deep South there. So it's sweltering hot. It's
Oh,
sweltering hot.
and I
It's
can add
super.
something.
Yeah.
I can add something really quick. I don't think dry heat
Hmm.
might be the right thing. I don't think it's the heat. I think the humidity uh, definitely helped me in my adjustment to altitude, because I had gone on a trip to India in February and spent an entire month in India, and the humidity was crushing over there. And I don't think that, although I didn't really have much of a choice and I wasn't able to get to altitude sooner, like I do think that being at a crushing 90-95% humidity definitely helped my body like deal with like red blood cells and stuff like in a more efficient way. And I don't think that it can definitely harm you. But again, I have no basis for this, but I do think that the humidity probably helped me make an adjustment to being going from sea level to training at 7,000 feet.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was going as well. I think the humidity can help, and it sounded like Simon at Badwater going to Colorado directly after, or shortly thereafter. It's not a humid environment, although it's hot. It's definitely there's no humidity
I mean,
whatsoever.
I've done humidity also, and that did not translate either. But I think progression, I mean, what Hum described though is going at 7,000, which for me, 7,000, I will feel it. Like I won't be 100%, but I'm not struggling so much. And like the kind of stepward approach is probably it's the best. But yeah, I mean, I don't know that you have anything in Georgia that you can do that.
Yeah, totally. I think in Adam's case, or you're in that southern area. I think it was 99% humidity today. He ran. We got off a Zoom call about 4 o'clock, so he had ran just before that, so he was running in basically the heat of the day. And sometimes the options aren't there, right? I mean, that's what you have to do. And I would say that scientists, somebody they say it actually does help, but I don't know if I have any firsthand experience with it. I do live at Colorado. In Colorado, I live at 7,000 feet. Um, but even athletes I coach, I think there's a lot of placebo effect to it. I believe personally that I guess my real answer is like it can't hurt, right? Like because it's all training, right? You're training the body. The effects of red blood cells and trying to get blood to the surface to sweat when you're in humidity can be correlated to some sort of altitude. I don't know what the correlation is or how that works. How much humidity you need and what the temperatures need to be. In order to make that correlation correct. But people do say it works. It sounds like you guys have a little to no great positive experiences with that. So
I
I think
If Adam
go
is
ahead.
planning to run, say, Leadville, for example, I cannot emphasize how much it would be beneficial if you can get there 1 or 2 weeks ahead of time. It's like it's of course training in the middle of the day. I mean, why not? Like you should. It might be hot in Leadville anyway, so like great. But for knowing people that live in Florida or that are also in the southeast that went to Leadville and DNF Leadville and it's their only DNF, it feels that the heat of the summer, even with humidity, was not enough. But the people that go in advance, for me, 2 weeks is enough. 2 weeks is plenty of time. 1 week would already help. 3 days, they say, is the worst. If you're only going to be there 3 days, you might as well come the day before. So it's kind of the guidance we have.
Yeah, totally. 10 days out would be a great choice to come out, or the night before the race if you can. But anywhere in between is just kind of a gray black window. That's not the best. 3 days, it takes about 3 days if you're coming from sea level to experience some of the issues that you may have at altitude. So coming out 3 days beforehand might be the recipe for disaster, unfortunately. Thanks, Adam, for the question. I sort of hope we answered it, and best of luck. Where can we find you on social media?
Well, you can find me if you want to reach out to me. If you want to find me, you can. The best place is Instagram at the Aum Gandhi, and of course, you can also find me answering messages at Run Try Mag as well on Instagram. And yeah, those will be the two places you can find me. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to help however I can or guide you to the person who can.
I appreciate all that you're doing in the space of ultra running. You're putting yourself out there. You're telling the stories. You're getting the stories. You're sharing the stories. You're helping out a community that's in need, and you're challenging yourself, and you're growing yourself. I think it's the full trifecta, and I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you and appreciate both of you guys for having me on the show. This is a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Take care, We'll see you soon. We'll be rooting for you at the Triple Crown.
I'm Simon, and that's Brian.
We'd be thrilled to connect with you beyond our show.
For all of your endurance coaching requirement, you can reach out to Coach Brian at altitudeendurancecoaching.com.
To explore more of Simon's content, visit Running with Simon on YouTube.
Don't forget to rate, like, and share our content regularly.
Your support means a lot to us. Thanks.